So today I'm going to be responding to the claim that graffiti has substantial negative effects on society. My opponent's secondary claims were that graffiti is vandalism and it costs money to clean up. The second one is that graffiti leads to more crime. And the third one is that graffiti leads to violence. My secondary claims that I formed based on those were that number one is graffiti is an art form that needs to be developed with the help of the government to make it a legal art. Two, graffiti is finally starting to come into the mainstream where it is being recognized as an art form rather than a form of crime. And three, graffiti is a way to escape from the violence and drugs that many youth face from inner city life. For my first point, the Advocate did significant research, but they forgot to mention the fact that not all graffiti is illegal graffiti. They say that even though graffiti is seen as an art, it is a crime, a misdemeanor, or even a felony in certain states, and that the cost and cleanup can range from hundreds to thousands of dollars, and it is mandatory that you remove it in most cities. There are actually graffiti walls that exist that are for illegal graffiti, and according to legalwalls.net, 4 of these walls exist in the Los Angeles area, and many more plan to be erected. And there are many of these walls in other countries too. There are a few hundred in Europe, and they have a lot lower graffiti rates than we do. For my second point, she neglected to do research on people that do graffiti as a form of art rather than a form of representing their gang or crew. Therefore, she neglected to take in a majority of the tagging community that all want their art form to be developed and recognized. Basically, the whole point from her secondary claim was that one person leads to more people doing graffiti, and that they will eventually form gangs that compete and eventually turn to violence. There are actually many graffiti artists who pursue their own solo careers and are just trying to get their art recognized. According to BBCnews.com, Wang Mo, a 24-year-old citizen of China, uses his graffiti to express his opinions about the government and show off his tagging talent in legal places set up by the Chinese government. Also, many citizens in the United States use graffiti as a form of political expression and a way to express their viewpoints toward an audience. And in an article from New York Times, among those honored in the show called Tag at the Grand Palais in Paris are 4 New York pioneers who have been active since the 1970s. Some 150 graffiti artists prepared works for display in the show. Most are from the United States, France, but countries including Australia, Brazil, Chile, and Japan are also represented. This just shows that graffiti is starting to be accepted as an art form rather than a crime, and that the government needs to help with that. For my third point, of all the taggers that exist, she only found one case to support her idea that tagging leads to violence. I didn't hear about any statistics that show how many people are taggers are also convicted felons, and most of her points for her third claim were based from one case. The Advocate adopts the idea that since one person is all violent, all taggers must be violent, and this is a hasty generalization. From the article Graffiti, Art and Crime, graffiti can be seen as a way for teenagers and young adults to escape the mundane existence of everyday life and possibly a career in crime and drugs. So rather than lead the life of crime and drugs, the graffiti is a way for the young kids to escape that reality and express themselves. And from another article, Graffiti and Expressive Controversy, an article from the Pen, graffiti artists see what they do as making the city a brighter and more attractive place to be, a public service of sorts. While looking at some parts of our country's urban areas, there are lots of very unattractive blank walls or walls covered with the unattractive and offensive gang graffiti. And graffiti artists take it upon themselves to clean up the city and often cover up gang graffiti to make them look better. In conclusion, as you can see through my points, graffiti is a struggling art form that helps kids from the inner city express themselves and escape from the drugs and violence. Many other governments around the world support their artists and create legal places where they can tag and create art. Just think, would you rather have people spreading color around the city through art or have them shooting each other up and trafficking drugs? Thank you.
All right, well, the labeling of the claims is pretty clear. You are basically presenting a counter criteria on how to evaluate this subject, and I thought that you did an okay job developing your criteria and using it to try to respond to the points of the advocate. I do think, though, that there are a couple places where you were doing some equivocating, as with the graffiti walls, places where it is, in fact, encouraged as art as opposed to the kinds of graffiti that the advocate is probably talking about. And I'm not sure that they are the same sort of thing, so you want to be careful about that. There is a claim that Europe has less, in part because of the availability of those walls, and that information is asserted, so you need some data on that. Let's see, and you've got a lot of illustrations on the artistic merit issues and the counterclaims on the criteria there, so I think that's pretty good. Although there's not much discussion of some of the claims that the advocate presented, the cost issue especially is not discussed. The clearest argument that you have that directly addresses the advocate's point was the point about tagging and the link to violence. You present a counterclaim arguing basically that graffiti is actually a way out of violence, but it seems to be just an assertion, and even though it's a quote, or it appears to be a quote at one point, it's also an assertion from the authority, and I don't know who the authority is. So we've got one assertion versus the other, and the advocate had an example, and I mean, you've got examples as well, so we don't have any way of comparing that particular data. Right at the end of the speech, it seems like you're suggesting that there are only two possible outcomes, and if we have to choose between those two things, we should choose your point of view. Simplifying it to those choices assumes that they are mutually exclusive ideas, and I'm not sure that that's a point that you've proved in your argument, although you did make a good argument for the viewing some types of graffiti, at least, apparently not the tagging kind of thing where it's gang tags, as being artistic. All right, thank you.